Don't touch it, filthy hands!
Omar al-Farid, a billionaire known for his ruthless power, sneered in Arabic, certain the young woman couldn't understand him. Laughter rippled around the table, echoing in the air, heavy with perfume and authority. But Sarah Collins, a 25-year-old with natural curls tied back at her nape and a thin scar above her brow, suddenly lifted her head and answered in flawless Arabic, shocking the entire hall. The crystal glass does not lower the one who holds it. It only reflects the dignity of the one who drinks. Her words rang out clear and confident, cutting through the laughter until it died away. In that instant, Sarah, dressed only in a plain black uniform and worn-down shoes, shone brighter than any sequined gown in the room full of politicians, tycoons, and society elites. Faces froze in astonishment, but Sarah's eyes remained steady, neither arrogant nor submissive. Few in the room knew the story hidden behind her composure. Sarah had grown up in a wealthy American household adopted by a linguistics professor who taught her discipline and the power of words. Yet, reality was crueler than any lesson. Her mother was fighting cancer back in Ohio, while hospital bills rose like a raging tide, devouring every modest paycheck. Her job as a server in a foreign land was nothing more than a lifeline, a way to keep battling a fight she refused to abandon. That night, her slow steps across the room felt like a walk through a lion's den. The tailored suits, suffocating perfumes, piercing stares, and whispered slurs created a choking atmosphere. A woman in a glittering evening gown leaned toward her companion and whispered, "This is the best they could find." Sarah bit her lip, her tray steady, her face a mask of calm. At the head of the table sat Omar, clad in glossy silk, his eyes sharp, his smile sharper than a blade. Beside him was his daughter Ila, a 22-year-old student abroad whose black eyes missed nothing. Around them gathered all sorts, a politician with a loose tie and forced laugh, a media mogul flashing his Rolex, and Clara, a socialite with a smile that never reached her calculating eyes. To them, Sarah was nothing more than decoration in their game of power. In the kitchen, Sarah slipped her phone from her apron. A text from her cousin sent her heart plunging. The insurance denied it again. Mom won't have another chance at treatment. Her hands trembled until her knuckles whitened. She drew a long breath, tucked the phone away, dried her palms, and stepped back into the hall with a face as calm as before. Seconds later, Omar's mockery cut through the air like a knife, followed by a chorus of cruel laughter striking the cracks already splintering her soul. Every step, every movement became a test. A man in a tailored suit pointed at her faded apron and scoffed. "Did you sew that yourself? Looks like it came from a bargain bin." Others joined in. "Maybe she's saving up for something decent. But on a server's wage, good luck." Their laughter bounced off the marble walls, turning the ballroom into a cruel theater. Illa turned her glass slowly, her eyes lingering on Sarah. Unlike the others, she didn't laugh. Her young face tightened in silence. Sarah kept walking, shoulders square, tray steady, her silence a quiet defiance. But when Clara leaned forward, her voice syrupy sweet and razor-sharp. "Letting her serve us is already a kindness, isn't it?" The table roared with applause and laughter, as if they had just heard the night's best joke. Sarah's hand trembled as she poured water for a politician, the liquid spilling slightly over the rim and catching the chandelier's glow. She glanced up and met Ila's gaze, a look not of ridicule, but of unease. Yet Omar pressed harder, his words slicing. "Look at her stumbling like she's lost in a market. Doesn't even know where she is." Laughter thundered louder, shredding her dignity in front of the entire hall. A young man in velvet leaned back, his voice smooth and poisoned. "I bet she's never set foot in a place like this. Judging by the way she holds that tray, this must be her first day." A woman wrapped in fur shrieked with laughter. "She probably thinks this is the height of luxury." How pitiful. Sarah's face stayed solemn, but her eyes burned with a stubborn light, a reminder that scars, though silent, can silence an entire room. Does this story stir something in your own memory? If so, pause for a moment, hit like, share, or leave a comment about your own experience. It's these small gestures that bind us together through the moments that test us most. The air in the ballroom turned frigid, the laughter pressing on Sarah's chest like a weight. For the first time that night she paused, lifted her head, and locked eyes with Omar Al-Fared. At first no one noticed, but Illa did. Her napkin slipped from her lap, her breath catching. Then Sarah spoke her Arabic, ringing out like a taut string vibrating in the silence. The crystal glass does not lower the one who holds it. It only reflects the dignity of the one who drinks. Her words fell like thunder from a clear sky. The table went dead silent. Omar's smirk vanished, his face paling. A politician choked on his own tie, coughing violently, while a woman wearing a diplomatic badge gasped. Truth had torn through the farce of laughter. Illa's lips curved into a faint smile, like light breaking through stone. Forks and knives hung motionless in midair. Sarah stood still, her hands folded, her gaze calm yet unyielding. The media mogul shifted awkwardly, his Rolex flashing as he forced a brittle smile. Well, that was unexpected. His voice cracked. Clara swallowed hard, her pearl necklace suddenly heavy as lead. A young waitress passing by whispered to her co-worker, who glanced at Sarah in awe. The entire room's attention now belonged to her, not as a nameless server, but as a mystery none of them yet understood. Yet, in the silence, a man in a pinstripe suit leaned forward, his voice dripping with mockery. Knowing a few phrases isn't enough to sit here. His words were an attempt to drag the room back to its old rhythm, but his eyes betrayed him, fixed on Sarah, searching for a crack. Sarah adjusted the napkin on the table, her fingers steady, though the faintest tremor flickered at the corner of her lips, as if something unspoken lingered. Illa held her breath, her eyes darting between her father and Sarah, sensing a storm about to break. Omar tried to regain the upper hand, letting out a hollow laugh before switching to English. Probably just a handful of tourist phrases memorized. Clara cut in her shrill voice, echoing exactly like a parrot dressed in a cheap uniform. The politician chimed in with a forced chuckle. "Don't get carried away. She's still just a waitress." Their words carried contempt, but unease had already crept into their eyes. Murmurs rose from the table. "She can't really be fluent. She's trying to trick us." Omar crossed his arms, eyes narrowing. "If you're truly skilled, then prove it. Say something worth hearing." His challenge hung in the air like a declaration of war. A woman in a golden dress, her red nails gleaming under the chandeliers, tapped her spoon against her plate with a metallic ring. "Let's have some fun. Recite something impressive, unless all you can do is play parrot tricks." Laughter burst again, some even clapping as if waiting for a performance. Sarah's hand froze when it touched the glass, her fingers tightening for a heartbeat before loosening. She didn't look at them, but straightened her back, her posture steady, commanding the table's attention without a word. Illa's eyes widened, her breath quickening. She could feel destiny drawing near. Sarah set the glass down deliberately, giving them a moment to stew in their doubt. Then she raised her head and locked eyes with Omar. Her voice rose deep, resonant, reciting verses of Al-Mutanabi, the great 10th century Arab poet. Each line flowed like a river over stone, echoing with the breath of 1,000 years of history. The hall fell into stunned silence. A scholar with thick glasses nearly dropped his fork. "Extraordinary," he whispered, his voice trembling. Only someone who lived and studied within the Arab world could speak like this. All eyes shifted back to Omar, no longer mocking, but shadowed with suspicion and doubt. Illa whispered sharply. "Baba," she pronounced every word perfectly. The words were soft, but they cut through the silence like a blade. Omar's jaw tightened, his fingers drumming tensely against the table. Clara bowed her head, her pearl necklace suddenly a chain around her throat. Sarah did not boast, did not gloat. She simply poured water for the guest beside her, her face calm as though nothing had shifted. The silence cracked when a man with a trimmed beard, gold cufflinks glinting at his wrists, spoke coldly. "Pretty words aren't enough. She probably learned them for tourists." A few weak chuckles followed, but gone was the roaring laughter. Sarah paused, glanced briefly at him, then returned to her work. Her silence now stood like a wall they could not breach. Illa unclenched her hands, her gaze fixed on Sarah, recognizing the quiet strength in her every movement. But Omar refused to yield. His voice cut sharper. Poetry is easy. Flowery speech proves nothing. "What do you know of commerce of finance?" he signaled to the media tycoon, who immediately smirked and hurled a question in Arabic, dense with trade taxes, oil markets, and calculated jargon, clearly a trap to expose her. The politician chuckled. "This will finish her." Clara raised her glass, lips curling. "Let's see her stumble now." Sarah tilted her head, listening carefully, her eyes alive with focus, as though solving a riddle. Illa gripped her hands tightly beneath the table, her heart pounding. Then Sarah began to answer without pause. Her voice was clear and assured, dissecting trade routes, outlining economic impacts, even citing figures from recent agreements. Her words carried the authority of someone who could have written the very reports they studied. The politician gaped, then broke into slow, deliberate applause. Not just fluent. This is real knowledge. The room shifted again. No one saw a waitress anymore, but a hidden intellect. Some gazes brimmed with respect, others with caution. Sweat dotted Omar's forehead, his hand clutching the edge of the table. Illa exhaled pride glowing in her eyes. Sarah only dipped her head slightly, continuing her work as if nothing had happened. The chatter grew hushed. A silver-haired diplomat leaned toward his neighbor, his voice heavy. "Who is she, a woman in a sapphire dress, earrings glittering like the chandeliers?" whispered back. "Probably just showing off. People like her often do." The doubt, though hushed, carried enough weight to make others nod. Sarah adjusted a bottle of wine on the side table, her fingers brushing the label as her posture stiffened. She offered no reply, only stood straighter, her presence unwavering. When another server dropped a tray, the crash echoed, but no one looked. All eyes remained on Sarah, drawn to her quiet fire. Illa parted her lips to speak, but stopped, her gaze locked on Sarah. Omar's voice broke the moment. Low, bitter, sharp. "A servant will always remain a servant. Language doesn't change your place," Clara added coldly, her pearls catching the light as if sealing her verdict. "Exactly. Tonight you're nothing but entertainment. Don't overstep." Several guests nodded, desperate to restore their fragile order. Sarah's lips curved not into a smile, but into a sharp line of someone who had heard this far too often. She gave no answer, only carried on her hands steady, her eyes sweeping across the table as though she could see through each polished mask. The politician leaned closer, raising his voice to stir the crowd again. "She's exaggerating. No one like her could know that much." The media tycoon nodded, his slick hair gleaming. "Let's be realistic. She's a server. This is all a performance." Their words lingered, waiting for Sarah to falter. But she did not. She set the tray down slowly, deliberately, and spoke in resonant Arabic. "Yes, I was once a servant, and I was also the student of Professor Yusuf al-Hassan, linguistic advisor to the government." The name struck like a stone cast into still water, rippling through the room. The politician nearly dropped his glass, his hands trembling. "I knew him," he exclaimed, standing in shock. "He only accepted the best, the most brilliant. If she studied under him, she's exceptional." Whispers surged, heads turned, eyes widened. Illa covered her mouth, her breath catching. "I can't believe it." Omar's face paled, his knuckles whitening as they clenched the table's edge. Sarah didn't look at him. She kept working calm, unshaken, as though the revelation were just a passing detail. Then a man in a black tuxedo, diamond-studded watch flashing under the light cleared his throat. His voice carried a sneer. "Even if she studied under him, she's still serving us tonight. Doesn't that say it all?" His words pierced the rawest wound, class. A few joined in, eager to pull the atmosphere back to their side. Sarah's hand paused briefly on a porcelain plate, her fingers curling for a heartbeat before setting it down gently. Her gaze flicked across the table, sharp as a blade, before settling into stillness again. Illa's shoulders tensed, her eyes burning as though bracing for lightning. The whispers thickened. Who is she? How could she know so much? Omar strained his voice, grating with wounded pride. If you're truly talented, why work here? Real talent doesn't lower itself. Clara tilted her head, pearls glinting. Perhaps she's making it up to save face. The media tycoon leaned back, smirking. Let's see if she can really prove it. Sarah drew a steady breath as if she had been waiting for this moment. From her apron, she pulled out an old envelope, its edges frayed, the royal seal glimmering under the chandelier light. Carefully, she opened it and read aloud in a clear, calm voice. Full honor scholarship awarded to Sarah Collins, signed Omar Al-Farid. The collective gasp sucked the air out of the ballroom. Omar's face drained of color, his hand trembling, eyes wide. Years earlier, he had signed hundreds of scholarships. Faces forgotten, names blurred. But the recipients never forgot. Sarah's gaze pierced him, her voice soft yet cutting through. You may forget many people, but we do not forget you. She has ties to Alpha Red. A woman clutching a silver purse exclaimed loud enough for the entire row to hear. A wave of whispers swelled like an underground storm. Sarah folded the envelope slowly, tucked it back into her apron. Illa's eyes brimmed with tears. She rose her chair, scraping the marble floor, and crossed the space to throw her arms around Sarah. I'm sorry, she whispered, her shoulders trembling. Sarah returned the embrace, her face gentle, steady as stone. Applause began in hesitant bursts from the back of the hall, then grew into waves. Guests rose to their feet, faces a mixture of awe, respect, and unease. Omar sat frozen, clutching at the air as if it were his last lifeline while his world crumbled around him. A statesman shook his head, murmuring, unbelievable. His words drowned by the storm of clapping. Clara stared fixedly at her glass cheeks, flushed her pearl necklace, suddenly choking. The media mogul turned away, his smug smile gone. Sarah stepped back, resuming her work, as though nothing had happened yet. Every eye followed her now. A man in a white suit stood attempting to salvage dignity. This doesn't change the fact that tonight she is still serving. His words sank into silence, swallowed by applause. Sarah paused, her hand resting lightly on a chair, her eyes lifting to him for just a second. A faint tilt of her head, a subtle arch of her brow, enough to say, status is a coat, dignity is the skin itself. The night didn't end in the ballroom. By morning, a shaky phone video capturing Sarah's reply spread like wildfire, millions of views within hours. Comments poured in raw and unfiltered. She leveled him with pure class. Who is she, Omar? Got the lesson he deserved. By noon, the media tycoon's company announced the cancellation of a major sponsorship tied to him. Handshakes were withdrawn under the glare of social media. Clara's exclusive circle slammed its doors shut. Event invitations vanished like water in a desert. The politician's face became the butt of countless memes, his arrogant remark mocked mercilessly. Campaign ads quietly disappeared. One video might not change the world, but it could change a room and everyone inside it. A week later, a local reporter visited the restaurant during Sarah's break. Your story has inspired so many, she said, gripping her notebook. Can you describe what it felt like to stand up in that room? Sarah leaned lightly against the counter, folding her apron neatly, her gaze momentarily distant. She smiled, her fingers brushing the rim of her coffee cup. It felt like telling the truth, she answered simply before turning back to her work, leaving the reporter in respectful silence. In the kitchen, the other servers exchanged glances, wordless nods. Their respect had already found its place. For Omar, the storm was far from over. His company's board convened an emergency meeting. In a world where reputation is the ultimate currency, every action exacted its cost. By the weekend, he stepped down. No one claimed Sarah had brought him down. She didn't need to. The old order unraveled not with a punch, but with truth knocking long enough at the door. Somewhere among glass towers, someone began rewriting policies on staff training, respect in service, and scholarships once handed out and forgotten. And in the small kitchen behind the grand ballroom, Sarah rolled up her sleeves and washed a stack of crystal glasses. They gleamed brighter, not because they were polished more carefully, but because the one holding them had shown a dignity the entire room was forced to see. Truth had swept through like a tide, leaving bare sand in its wake. A week after that fateful night, Ella walked into the restaurant where Sarah worked. Her eyes were still red, but they carried warmth. In her hands was a small notebook, its pages filled with shaky but sincere handwriting lines of apology. She pressed it into Sarah's palm and whispered, "You changed everything." Sarah nodded, slipped the notebook into her pocket. Without opening it, her face calm, though her eyes glowed with tenderness she could not hide. Memories pulled Sarah back years earlier to a cramped apartment in Cairo. A single candle lit the figure of her adoptive father, Professor Al-Hassan, patiently teaching her Arabic. His voice, rough yet kind, echoed in her mind as she walked through Dubai's neon night. "Words are power, my daughter. Use them wisely." Back then she had been only a child, eager devouring every lesson, every language, every quiet glimmer of pride in her father's eyes. Now Sarah carried those lessons in her worn shoes, her plain uniform, her unbreakable strength. The city pulsed with noise and lights, yet she walked alone, her steps steady, her heart heavy but whole. A car horn blared behind her, as familiar as the hum of the old engine her father once drove. She stopped, hand-brushing the envelope in her pocket, eyes following the taillights vanishing into the night. A passerby bumped her shoulder, muttering an apology in haste. Sarah didn't respond. Her gaze still distant, her fingers gripping the frayed paper. The image of her father's strong hand on her shoulder surged back, anchoring her in the chaos. She drew a deep breath, released her shoulders, and moved on. Her silence had become both shield and sword. Outwardly, life didn't change much. Sarah still worked double shifts, still sent money home for her mother's treatment. But what changed was the way she carried herself, the way her eyes met the world. Stronger, steadier. She had always known who she was, even when the world refused to acknowledge it. Now the world could no longer look away. One night, a fellow server, a man with a tired smile, handed her a few bills from tips. His voice low but sincere. "You don't just belong here, Sarah." She nodded, tucked the money into her apron, her face composed, but her eyes lit with an unspoken fire. Another evening, while Sarah wiped down tables, a little girl about 10 approached shyly, clutching a crumpled drawing. "I saw you online," the child whispered, timid but clear. "You're so brave." The drawing showed a woman standing tall beneath falling stars. Sarah's fingers traced the uneven lines, her lips parting, her gaze softening. She bent down to the girl's eye level, smiling. "Thank you." Her voice was warm, quiet, folding the drawing with care. From a distance, the girl's mother watched, eyes shining, a silent smile on her lips. Time passed. The story faded from headlines, but inside that small restaurant, Sarah's presence left an afterglow. One evening, a regular customer, a man in a worn leather jacket, paused her as she passed. His voice gravelly but kind. "You made us think again, kid." He pushed forward a generous tip. Sarah stilled, their eyes meeting, then nodded, slipping the money into her pocket. His words lingered, an unspoken affirmation of the ripples she had set in motion. She returned to the counter, her movement slow, her silence now a power of its own. And perhaps you too have felt that same moment, dismissed by a glance, judged by your clothes, or trapped in an image someone else imposed. Maybe you've stood in a strange room where the air suddenly turned cold, yet you kept moving. You held yourself firm, not with anger, but with quiet strength, a force louder than words. Sarah's story is also your story. It's about standing tall, letting truth speak when the world tries to silence you. You are not wrong, and you are never alone. So where are you watching from? Leave a comment below, share your own experience, and hit subscribe so we can keep walking together through pain, betrayal, and finally healing. Because this isn't just Sarah's story, it belongs to all of us.